Hey everyone, my name is David Rao and I'm the music teacher who blogs at makemomentsmatter.org. You can also find my ideas on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, a variety of other places when you search for my name, David Rao, or Make Moments Matter. Tonight is my 15th Musical Mondays video of the semester, and I've been doing these videos throughout the school year for, I think this is my 5th year doing, let's say 1, 2, 3. No, this is my 6th year doing this. And I do about 30 videos a year. So that means there are, 180 videos out there. If you're interested and you want more content, you're like, no, this can't be your last one of the semester. Well, guess what? There are 5 previous years and then this whole year that you can go through and watch if you want in your own time. But tonight I'm going to be answering as many questions as I can. People have been sending questions for the last week. If you have a question about something I've shared in these videos of the last semester or year, or just something that you want me to talk about, you can leave it in the comments and I'll try and get to that as quick as I can. But there are some questions I'm going to try and answer, do my best to answer all different kinds of stuff, and that's coming up in just a second. So if you hear about a resource, a blog, a book, if something comes up that I talk about in these videos, I try and put all the links and the details from these videos on one page. You can go to my blog, makemomentsmatter.org, and click the video tab, or wherever you're watching, listening to this, there should be a direct link in the comments or the caption, so you can go directly and learn about those details if you want. Okay. Let's see. So, one more thing, if you are like, hey, I love training, I want more training, there are so many great, summer trainings coming up. If you're interested in, or for Kodai or anything else, there are some really great things coming out this summer. If you want to take level 1, I am actually teaching level 1 ORF in 2 places this summer. Come and join us. I'll be at the Central Florida ORF chapter, at the beginning of the summer in early June, and then also at the University of Missouri St. Louis in late July. Come and join us. It's going to be super fun for level 1 of ORF Schulberg. Okay, let's get to some questions. So, like I said, over the last week, people have been asking great questions. If you have some right now, you want to drop them in the comments, I'll try and answer them. But I'm going to get through as many of these as I can. So, someone said, what procedures do you use when getting out instruments and kids wanting to help clean up and run for the bass xylophones to put away? And the commenter said, I've had them start to fight over carrying them to put them away. Okay, well, this all depends on you and your classroom setup. I'm lucky enough to not only have ORF instruments, but also have stands. So for me, it's not so much picking up and moving, it's more just rolling a cart. And again, it all depends on you and your classroom and your expectations. But I think having a process that you use for all classes, so then like not only do you get used to saying it a lot, kids get used to hearing it, they get used to carrying out those procedures. It's all just planning and procedures. So you have to figure out what is the quickest and easiest way to put away, what involves kids that takes away stress from you. It really just depends. Right now I'm at a class where, or in a school where my kids can just roll the instruments back for me. And move them to a specific space in the music room that I'm lucky enough to have enough space to just sort of park them when I'm not using them. I know I've been in a school where they have to go up on shelves, and so it depended for that school. Usually older kids would move the bigger instruments and younger kids would not move them as much, or maybe would move them over to the shelf, but I would put them on the shelf. It kind of depended upon the grade, what they were able to do, and what my expectations were. One of the things that really helped, though, was numbering the instruments. So numbering them so that they would come back in a certain order, so then I wasn't like, okay, bring all the alto xylophones, and they're trying to figure out which ones those are. But now I can just say, like, okay, if you have instrument 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bring it back to me. If you have instrument 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever. But numbering them has made it really easy so that they get back to me at least in order I expect, and we can sort of put them back in order. But kids then can also anticipate, like, oh, I'm number 12, I'm coming up in just a second. So that sort of helps a little bit. But again, it all depends on your classroom. It depends on where you store them, if you store them, if you leave them out. I mean, it all just kind of depends. One of the things that someone else said was, how do you get kids to carry a glockenspiel so they don't dump all the bars when they're carrying? And I like to say to kids, you need to treat it like it's a lunch tray. Hold on. I have a glockenspiel here. I can use it as an example. Okay, so if they're carrying it and they're moving it around, they're not careful, the bars could come off, right? But I always say, carry it like it's a lunch tray, like you have food on the food on it and you don't want to lose anything. Maybe there's even, I don't know, soup or something else that could spill. Jello. I don't know. That can't really spill. Soup, some sort of liquid or something you don't want it to spill. So you need to carry it level and carry it back carefully. Always 2 hands as you carry it. But yeah, just building those procedures, and it's things that you can then over time build on. Once you figure out what works well, then, you know, they come back to you a little bit easier. The person said before, how do you have kids not fighting each other to help move things away? Well, again, I have numbers on my instruments, and when we finish, I always say, okay, whoever currently has number 4, bring that number 4 back, or number 5. So then kids aren't fighting about like, oh, I'm going to take this one, I'm going to take this one. Well, it's whoever was on that instrument, and they get to bring it back. Again, you just build those procedures over time as you figure out what works best for you. Okay, let's see if there's any other like logistical stuff, questions like that. Okay, yeah. Another one someone said was, do your students take recorders home and practice at home? And do you teach recorder all year or only as a unit within the year? How often do you see your classes? Because I've been talking the last couple weeks about recorder. So a couple of things, my classes are an hour long. I see them once every 5 school days, so basically once a week for an hour. I do recorder throughout my 4th and 5th grade year. Usually it's towards the end of the year. It's not really like a unit, but it's like by the time I get parents to send in money and order recorders and all that, it's not as seamless like through the year as I would like. Plus also my school, the way that my school has built programs over the years, their expectations for programs is it's always like, oh, well, 4th grade always does a Veterans Day, 5th grade always does a Christmas one, or not Christmas, but like December, winter, holiday, or whatever. And that's been an expectation that I did not set, but that has been given to me. And so it doesn't give me as much flexibility, because when you first, I think, are doing recorders, you want to do it for a while, long enough that kids can learn expectations and build up a skill before you shelve it for a while. And so for me, I can't really start recorders and really get into any depth or any workable space with them until about 2nd semester. So for me, it usually starts 2nd semester, rolls through the rest of that year. We'll do like a unit, not a unit, we'll do a couple weeks at a time, or we'll do really intense, and then we might play games and just do a recorder for part of the class or half the class or some of the class. And then just sort of weave that in and out as we go. But it's something that we learn in one grade and bring back in the next. So 4th and 5th. Yes, my students take their recorders home. Not at first. My rule is you must know 3 notes and 2 songs to be able to take your recorder home. The notes I start with are B, A, and G. But again, that depends on you and what you want to do. But I always say you cannot take your recorder home until you have learned 3 notes and 2 songs. Because if you send them home on day 1, parents are going to go nuts. Kids are not going to have fun because they're going to go home and just squeak, 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 and they're not going to feel accomplished on the instrument, and so they're not going to want to put as much effort into it. It's just a bad cycle. So 3 notes and 2 songs, then they can take it home. Once they do take it home, then they have to bring it back, and we keep playing them, whatever. But yes, my students do take them home, and they do come back. Okay, let's see. Another logistical question. Someone said, how do you organize all the bits and pieces that go with games and songs? The rubber chicken, the button, the feathers, the rhythm dice, all that stuff. Even more important, how do you remember it is when you need it? Okay, well, again, I'm very lucky at my school. I have storage in my room. I have these big cabinets that are filled with like all sorts of stuff, right? But one specific section of a cabinet is like that stuff, the extra stuff. I have a basket with things that I pull out, like a teacup and a saucer for little Sally Walker, or, you know, a snake for Black Snake, or, you know, just I have rock candy for when I teach Alabama Gal. All those like little elemental, like tiny small things like elements, ephemera. I think I had a teacher once call them realia, like real examples of things. Those are all in like one little bin. And then if there's like printed out things that go along with the song, like I printed out the rhythm and we're going to figure out the rhythm, or heart charts, or extra stuff, that goes in another place. And then if there's something bigger that doesn't quite fit, maybe there's somewhere else in the cabinet. But I try and keep it all in basically the same place, so I'm not running around and looking for it all the time. And the thing that really helped make this happen was one year when I got really frustrated and I carved out the space. I took the time to figure out where to put all the stuff. Does it not get exactly in the right pace? No. But also at like the end of a song, I put it away. So like if we've done the song a couple weeks in a row, I put it back so it doesn't get lost in a bin or lost in wherever. But that's just something that over time has gotten better. I'm not like perfect at that, but it's gotten better. So all of that stuff is in one place. And then in my lesson plans, I'll put a little star by something and say like puppet, or a star that's like handouts or printables or whatever, just so I know like you have something to go along with this. And when I lesson plan, I look back at old lesson plans, and so then I know like, ooh, I need to pull out X, Y, and Z. Also, or if you have like a printed out version of that song, put a little post-it on it that says like, you got something in the basket for this or whatever. So do I always remember? No. Does that help? Yes. Okay, let's see. Someone else says, do you give professional development certificates? Yes, absolutely. If you do one of my online courses or something like that, yes, I'll give PD certificates. Just email me, makemomentsmatter@gmail.com. Okay, another person said, how do you start with a puppet? What exercises do you do to get yourself more comfortable using one? I wish there was an easy answer for this, and there's not. The answer is just you have to buy a puppet or get loaned or given a puppet, and you just have to use it in class. And the more you use it, the more you use it, the less awkward it will be. In fact, by the end of probably the first lesson, it will be less awkward. But you have to just use it and try it and play with it and be silly with it for about a class. And then it's fine. And then by the end of the class, you'll be fine, unless like, you know, a paraprofessional walks in and then it's awkward again for a minute. Or if your principal walks in, then it's awkward for a minute. But most of the people who walk in my room who see me using puppets, it's no big deal. They buy into it. They think it's fun too. I think part of the problem with people using puppets for the first time is you have to commit to it. So for example, I just happen to have this puppet here. So if I have this chicken and I'm talking, the chicken's talking to me, and I say, so like, how was your day? And it's like, oh, my day was great. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm so thankful that you got to invite me to your Musical Monday video. Right. So I'm just like being silly. I have no script or anything. Right. But one of the things is that when the puppet is talking, I look at the puppet. I don't look away. So if I'm saying something, it's like, hey, how are you doing today? And the puppet's like, oh, I'm doing so great. It's so wonderful. And, you know, like, and I don't really look at the puppet. I feel like kids won't as much either. But if I look right at the puppet and I treat it as if it's a person talking, a lot of kids will as well. So it's kind of like you have to go right for it and like actually, you know, give it attention as if it's a person. The other thing is you can't show them your fear. Like with kids, you can't be like, ha ha ha, this puppet, it's so fun, right? I mean, this chicken, it's a chicken, right? It's a chicken. It's a real chicken. You have to just commit that like it's a character in your room, and commit that like when you have it and you're using it, it is real and you treat it as if it's real. So how's your day today? Oh, it's great. I'm having such a wonderful time. Now, except the other day, did I tell you, the cow was sick. And I've got a story about the cow being sick. You know, like I just go for it and I like pay it attention. I am focused on the puppet. But also with kids, I also am like, okay, but actually, is she real? Or is she a puppet? She's a puppet. You know, like, I don't know. You have to strike a balance, but the more you use puppets, the easier it'll be. The more time you actually like look at and treat the puppet as if it's a real part of the conversation, the more kids will buy into. It takes time and it takes some practice, but luckily practicing with puppets is fun. When I say practice, I mean doing it with a class, not like me sitting. If I had a coworker who walked by and saw me in my classroom just sitting talking to my puppets, I really do hope that they would like knock and ask if I'm okay. But when I say practice, I mean like with kids in the room, I just have to use it over and over. And the more that I do, the better it becomes. Okay, let's see. Another question someone said, how do you lesson plan? Do you do a certain grade or day a week? How do you break it up, or do you do it all at once? Ooh, that's a great question. That asking me this year is a different answer than asking me last year. And it's a different answer than asking me 3 years ago. Over time, you just become better at lesson planning, I think. I used to spend hours and hours on lesson plans. And not that I don't spend time on lesson plans now. I do. But I've been teaching now. This is year 13 or 14. And I'm at the point where I keep a lot of my lessons year to year. So like something I taught to third grade last year, I'm teaching to them again this year. Um, and the reason being that like I have gotten comfortable with my pacing guide, I've gotten comfortable with my curriculum, I've gotten really comfortable with lessons that I'm teaching. So if it has worked, I keep it and I build on that. If it was a lesson that flopped, well then obviously I try and retool it or tweak it or whatever, or find a replacement. But if it's something that's like worked, I don't know, relatively well, I like to keep it and use it again. And so lesson planning becomes easier because it's less about like figuring out all the steps or figuring out all the things that go with it or all the tie-ins or whatever, and just figuring out how can I reuse it this year? Do I need to tweak it or make changes? And again, having used it before makes it easy to use again. So this is one of the reasons that I don't do lessons for like second and third grade. Like I won't teach the same song to second and third grade, because if I teach it to second grade and it goes really well, I want to be able to teach it again to second grade next year. And the same with third grade. If I teach it in third grade and it goes really well, I want to be able to teach it to the next year's third graders. But if next year's third graders got it last year in second grade, you can't use it. So you have to, so then you're sort of in a bind. So I don't teach things to multiple grade levels if I can help it. And that kind of helps a little bit with lesson planning. But going back to your question is, how do you plan? Well, it's usually, I have 5 days of lesson plans. So I have a 5-day rotation, sorry. So I teach the same lesson 5 days in a row. Somewhere in the middle of that section of 5 days, I pull out things and I start sketching out, planning, thinking about like, okay, well, we've been doing this. What's the obvious next step? What's the logical next thing I need to do? Or I pull out my lessons from last year and what did I do next then? And I sort of figure that out and plan that out sort of midweek, and then it's fleshed out and ready to go, hopefully, by day 5. So on the A day of the new rotation, I can just go with it. But lesson planning, it just gets better every year. Yes, do I still sit and contemplate things and think about things? Absolutely. Do I still like stress about stuff when I'm planning it? Because you never know if it's going to work with a new class. Or like last year I had 30-minute lessons, 2 30-minute lessons in a 5-day period. Now I have 1 hour-long lesson. So I've had to sort of retool and change how I teach things. But lesson plan has gotten easier the more I've done it, because then I can start just using the same things year to year, or building on those things I've used before. And it makes it look slightly easier. Is it ever perfect? No. I'm already thinking about programs for next year. What's your process? That's a great question. My last concert of the year is this week. And I've caught myself thinking like, hey, well, what do I do next year? I could do, I'm like, David, just get to the end of the year. Just make it through. Don't worry about next year yet, but I am thinking about it. So, I try and figure out when classes are going to have concerts first. I try and get it on the calendar first. And then based around that, if it's a certain time of year, it's a certain theme, if it's something like that, I try and think about what would maybe work that would be fun. One of the other things I like to take into account is, with my grades, I don't like to teach a lot of things just for a concert. In fact, I want most of the concert content to be lessons that I would teach to that grade anyway. So like second grade right now is having a concert, and we're doing some canonic stuff because they're working on canons. We're doing multi-part stuff because that's what they're doing. In the grade level, we're working on singing voice. That's, always a thing. Or singing in groups. That's a thing, more independent. So I'm not really teaching any lessons that I wouldn't already teach. I'm just sort of souping them up and changing them a little bit to be presented in a concert format. And yeah, like I might teach like one standalone song. I'm like, it's just like a stand and sing on the riser song. It's not necessarily part of my curriculum. I might do a couple of those. It's like bookends, or to really pull something together. But for the most part, I want to teach stuff that like I'm already going to teach anyway. That's why a lot of times my first grade concerts are somehow based around animals. It's going to the zoo, or going to the farm, or Animals Gone Wild, or Under the Sea. Something where I can take all these animal songs we learn in kindergarten and first grade anyway, and just pull them together and put them into a concert. So a lot of times first grade is like a variation on that theme of like something animals. Going to the circus, going to the zoo. I mean, like so many versions of that. But as I'm planning, I start like now early ahead, I start thinking about like, well, what could I do? And then one thing I do to really help is I pull out like a piece of paper and I write like third grade, 2024, 2025 on it, right? And I start listing out all the songs that I already teach in the school year that could go along with that theme, or things that I could tweak. Okay, well, instead of doing going on a bear hunt, could it be going on a lion hunt or whatever? You know, can you take some well-known song, modify it, and change it and still use it in a concert? You know, that's a thing to think about. But usually about once I am inspired by a theme, I start trying to pull things together. Like, I'm already starting to think like, it'd be really fun next year for second grade to do something like monsters. Like, what could I do monsters? And, you know, sort of start to think about, oh, well, I did that program a couple years ago that was sort of like anti-bullying. Could the monsters be like bullying the students? Could I reuse those songs that we already did, but just re-theme it? You know, like, that's sort of this thing I start to think about now, but that's like way out in advance. So thinking about concerts, it's kind of like, what fits with the curriculum? What fits with the time of year? Can I take some things and sort of make it easy? Instead of creating everything, can I take things that I'm already teaching that grade and just retool them, rethink them, and put them in the concert? Maybe. Okay, we're almost at the end of these questions. If you have, like I said, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll try and answer them if I can. Let's see. Okay, we talked about programs. We talked about lesson planning. We talked about PD certificates, puppets. Talked about ORF instruments, recorders. Ooh, okay. This last question is a question that I really legitimately don't think I can answer. Someone said top 10 book recommendations and how you'd use them in your classroom. I can't answer that in one video, because top 10 book recommendations and how I use them, I could do a whole hour-long lesson on one book and how I incorporate that in. But what I will say is I have some like categories of books. There are books that like I read just for the story. There are books that are based on songs. Books that are a jumping off point for a lesson. So maybe I have a song, a poem, or something that I want to teach and develop, but a book is a really great hook for that. So like, there's a song that doesn't have a lot of context. You can read a book that sort of takes us there. So let me see if I can think of an example of that. Oh, early on in the year, I talked about the Grumpy Fairies book. At the very beginning of the Musical Mondays this year, and I read Grumpy Fairies, and then we did the Grumpy March. So it was this dance called the Grumpy March, and we talked about being grumpy and whatever, but the book was like our focus for the lesson. It sort of took us there, and we used it as a jumping off point. Another book that I used recently is one called Paco and the Drum, and it's about this little frog who gets a drum, and her parents give her the drum, but it was a mistake because she goes out and things start happening. Okay, well, I use that when I'm doing like tubanos or when I'm doing world drumming. Like, it's just a way to sort of focus that lesson for that day, and we can build off, and we're going to be drumming, and so it's like drumming related, and we can pull out some elements that we might talk about while we're drumming from the book. So a jumping off point. Sometimes it's a book that I just sing or read to the kids because I think the story is great, or maybe it's a book that involves a famous musician I want to highlight that month. You know, maybe it's Latinx Heritage Month, and I want to talk about Celia Cruz, or I want to talk about I don't know, Selena or something. I want to talk about a specific person. I might read that book to give you more information about their life. Sometimes I also use books that I'll put up in the window just for kids to see, and maybe we don't talk about them in class, but they are getting the exposure to seeing that book, and they see that name, they learn that name. A lot of times I'll use books at the end of class for younger grades as a way to sort of bring them down and focus them in, so that they're not going completely wild back to their teachers. But yeah, books you can use in a lot of different ways. I have a whole page on Amazon where I just pull together books in lists, books for Black History Month, books for Women's History Month, books based on songs, books that involve Native American or Indigenous protagonists. Next month, I just started posting on my Facebook about books for AAPI, which is Asian American and Pacific Islanders, or Asian Heritage books, and those are things that I'm going to start pulling out because that's May is AAPI month. So on Amazon, I'm not saying you should buy them on Amazon, but on Amazon you can list there are a lot of listings for books, and I like Amazon because you can use it kind of like a Pinterest for stuff. So you can make these lists, and on these lists you can like draw in some of your favorite things. So I made a bunch of lists for books, and I will post that on the links page in case you want to go see. If you don't see a book there that you really love, that you're like, oh man, this should be in your songs category, it should be in your whatever category, like, let me know and I'll put it on that list. But I like to have those ready because this is the time of year where PTO is like, hey, we need to use the rest of our budget by 1 p.m. today. Anything you want. And so then I'll say like, oh my gosh, yes, here are like 3 books I would love to have for our classroom library. And so having them in lists like that makes it really easy to pull out and give to someone else to purchase if they want. Or, you know, like end of your budget, you get an email from your finance coordinator, your principal, like, hey, we need to spend $500 in the next 3 hours because somehow we got extra or whatever, miscalculated. Great, here are like 10 books that I'd love to have, but having those lists preset for you or ready to go will make life a lot easier. So I will put the link on the links page for if you want to go peruse some of the books on my favorite books list, and that'll give you some ideas. There's like no way I can, the question of top 10 favorite books and how you use them, I don't think I could cover that in like 2 hours because I would go too in depth, but I'll put that link to the book list, and you can see a lot of my favorites. And I already talked about how I kind of use books either as a jumping off point or to give more context or to highlight a specific person or thing. And you can see some of that in the list of books that I have brought in. Okay, well, it's been so much fun doing these Musical Mondays video. I hope they've been very helpful. If you want to go back and watch more Musical Mondays, like I said, this is year 6 of doing this. So there are 180 videos that have been pre-recorded that I've put in as podcasts. You can also find all of them on my blog under the video tab, makemomentsmatter.org. Just click through and you can find tons of videos. There's a specific topic, just scroll through and see what you find. You can also just search on my blog and that'll bring up some of those things too. But like I said, if you want more training, if you want more things, please find your local ORF chapter, your local Kodai chapter, find your local ORF training, go and check that out. If you want to come and study in the summer with me, I'm going to be in the Central Florida ORF chapter and the University of Missouri St. Louis doing ORF Level 1 this summer. But I hope you'll find a way to get more PD this summer and expand your horizons. Okay, well, that's it for Musical Mondays tonight and for this year. And if you have any questions, always reach out to me at makemomentsmatter@gmail.com. And I look forward to seeing you the next time. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.